Welcome back to another Wordy Wednesday. Dollar Store had new scarves and I went in and bought some. With any luck at all, while you are watching this, I will actually be getting my hair cut. Who knows? We'll see how that works out. Today, I thought we would talk about one of the most difficult letter combinations in the English language. No rules, no rhyme, no reason. You just have to memorize it and hope for the best. So, when we come back. So what is this little tricky bit of English? It's OUGH. It's called a tetragraph. It's 4. That's where we get the tetra from. A combination of 4 letters that usually has a particular sound. Not in the case of OUGH. It has an incredible variety of sounds, greater than any other in the English language. In fact, I don't know of a cluster of 4 letters that has as many different sounds as OUGH in any other language, which I suppose is unfair because not all languages rely on letters. But in this case, we have 11 distinct sounds coming from this combination. So let's just very quickly take a look at them. The first one that we're going to look at rhymes with stuff, and that is enough, rough, tough. Very common, use it every day. We have another one, this is 2, rhymes with off, and that is cough, trough. 3, this one rhymes with now or cow, and that's like bow or plow or drought. The next one, number 4, rhymes with no, though, furlough, although, dough. Next one, number 5, this is caught, rhymes with caught, as in C-A-U-G-H-T, not C-O-T. I know in some parts of the country those words sound identical. This would be bought, brought, fought, ought. True is another one, as in through or slew, S-L-O-U-G-H, not as in S-L-E-W. Let's see, where are we? We are at 7. This one is the unstressed syllable. And this is in things like borough, thorough. And in fact, it also shows up in proper names because I saw one reference to Willoughby, the character in Sense and Sensibility. And that sound is the schwa, the little upside down E that sounds like the A in about or the E in lemon. And it's an unstressed syllable sound, so it's a little different from all the rest. One of my favorites, hiccup. Yes, it rhymes with up. H-I-C-C-O-U-G-H is pronounced hiccup. There are 3 others that are usually set aside. I don't think they should be because English is English, and these are set aside, meaning they are viewed as dialects. One of them is F, and that is as in Greenwich, which is Greenough. And that is a river in Australia. Yes, it has that short little schwa sound, that upside down E. Remember, the A in about, or the E in lemon. And then we have some others that come to us from Scotland and Ireland. Lough, that little Scottish catch in the back of your throat like you have a hairball, or lock, which they are both acceptable pronunciations for OUGH. And that is, in fact, a total of 11 separate pronunciations for this consonant and vowel cluster. 11. Now, there are no rules. There is nothing that says, well, if the T is there, it rhymes with caught, as in bought or brought, or because it doesn't. Because what about drought? What about dowdy? No. And, it's on and on. Oh, I do think one tiny rule is when it's the unstressed syllable, as in thoroughly or Willoughby, like that. I do think that actually might be a firm rule, that it has that schwa sound, but I wouldn't bet my life on it because it's an OUGH word. So how did those words get so crazy? Well, at one time, the GH was pronounced. And the thing is, it wasn't always pronounced the same way. And it usually wasn't pronounced anything like the GH that we have in other words. For example, ghost or ghastly. Now, those, by the way, we get, presumably, I have to say this, presumably, we get them from the Dutch, that GH sound. And they used the G in combination with an H to differentiate between the hard G sound, as in ghost, for example, or, as we often do, we'll use a U as in guest or get, which is another way we say, this is a hard G, as opposed to our softer G, like gerbil. Well, we'll go with gibbet. That's what they hung people on, because these were medieval people and they probably didn't know much about, gerbils, but I bet they knew a whole lot about hanging people. And totally different. The GH that comes down to us from Old English probably had a completely different sound. It would have been, for example, the sound we have from laughter, L-A-U-G-H-T-E-R, where we have that F. It may well have been the sound that comes down to us in those Scottish and Irish words, lough, the hairball in the back of your throat sound. Those are much more likely candidates. Now, how do we know what something sounded like going back several hundred years? What linguists do to determine old pronunciations is they go after two things. One is rhymed poetry. They love rhymed poetry. Now, rhymed poetry is tricky because if, for example, I am a poet in the 17th century and I am rhyming the word daughter, D-A-U-G-H-T-E-R, with the word rafter, R-A-F-T-E-R, well, that alone doesn't tell us how they were pronounced. Daughter could have been pronounced dafter, but rafter could have just as easily been pronounced rotter, right? We know they rhyme, but which one is correct? Oh, and in fact, they both could have been pronounced in a completely different way. Then what you do is you find other poets and see what they rhymed with daughter, what they rhymed with rafter, and eventually you get a picture. By the way, it was rafter. You had sons and you had dafters. And we have a pretty good sense of this because the second source that linguists really love when it comes to getting pronunciation of old words is people with some education, but not a lot. They want women who could write, but who had not gone to school. And in those days, that was very easy to, if you found a woman who wrote, great, you got lucky. But you weren't going to find a woman who went to school. So they liked the writings of women a lot. Why this is important is because women will spell words as they sounded without having acquired any spelling conventions from their teachers at school. They would have learned to spell from their mothers. They would have had a rudimentary education and then would have been turned off on their own to make out as best they could. So a woman would write that word daughter as dafter, D-A-F-T-E-R, spelling it just as she would have spelled rafter. And we do in fact have spellings like that. So we do know that in colonial America, in the Boston area at least, we know that the word daughter was pronounced dafter. Really interesting. That pronunciation was probably not universal among English speakers. The reason why I say this is because the pronunciation that eventually stuck is the Scandinavian pronunciation. Because if you look at the Scandinavian languages, they are spelling daughter, D-O-T-T-I-R, or D-O-T-T-E-R, just like we are pronouncing it. So it's reasonable to assume that that's where we picked up our pronunciation. It's also reasonable to assume that we ended up with different pronunciations from different parts of England, some of which were brought over to the U.S. But remember, when we are talking about colonial America, we are only going back about 300 years. This is relatively recent, a very short time for that word to have changed. And what is likely, and this is my opinion, what is likely is other English speakers came to the New World from different parts of England, some of those different parts of England having acquired Scandinavian pronunciations, and those are the ones that took over, so that dafter was from perhaps a certain region of England, daughter from another, and daughter won out. Again, my opinion. But we also have a number of other spellings that we can rely on. Now here, let me share this one with you because I do love this. Ivanhoe. Now, this is early 19th century humor. Sir Walter Scott, by the way, was an Anglo-Saxonist, and he had something of an agenda in terms of elevating the status of the Anglo-Saxon culture, and of course Ivanhoe was his masterpiece in that regard. I'm just going to read you a brief passage. This deals with Cedric of Rotherwood having been kidnapped by some Norman knights, and his servants, Gurth the swineherd and Wamba the jester, have written a letter of defiance. And this is intended to be very comical. It's a couple of ruffians, rude and ill-educated people attempting to emulate the manners of their betters by writing this letter of defiance. Let's see. that whereas you have, without cause given or feud declared, wrongfully and by mastery, seized upon the person of our Lord and Master, the said Cedric, also upon the person of a noble and freeborn damsel, the Lady Rowena of Hargot-Stanstead, also upon the person of a noble and freeborn man, Athelstane of Coningsburgh, also upon the persons of certain freeborn men, their connects, also upon certain serfs, their born bondsmen, also upon a certain Jew named Isaac of York, together with his daughter, a Jewess, and certain horses and mules. Which noble persons, with their connects and slaves, and also with the horses and the mules, Jew and Jewess beforesaid, were all in peace with his majesty, and travelling as liege subjects upon the king's highway. Therefore we require and demand that the said noble persons, namely Cedric of Rotherwood, Rowena of Hargot-Stanstead, Athelstane of Coningsburgh, with their servants, connects, and followers, also the horses and mules, Jew and Jewess aforesaid, together with all their goods and chattels to them pertaining, etc., etc. Now, perhaps you've noticed that word that kept recurring, connects. Now, Scott spells it C-N-I-C-H-T-S. However, we are more familiar with that word spelled K-N-I-G-H-T-S. Yes, that is the word knights. That GS was pronounced, just as it is very likely, as I say, that daughter had a pronunciation very similar to laughter, that GH was a consonant sound that was articulated in these words. Now, we went through that long list of OUGH words, and it's hard to imagine like through sounding like thruh, or thruff, or a bot being boffed. I don't know what those words originally sounded like. I'm not sure anybody does. They clearly had wildly different pronunciations as they come to us in modern times. So that indicates a lot of pronunciation changes along the way. But we do know that the OUGH is very old. We know that it goes back to early, Old English, which is the early days where at this point we're going back 1,200 years, or probably a lot more. We know very, very old sound. It was articulated. And one of the interesting things that I hear in this is I know a number of people who have a Scots surname, as I do. Hamilton is a Scots name. I know several people with names like McLaughlin, which is in that case pronounced McLaughlin, or McLaughlin, same name, same GH, different pronunciation, and this comes down to us as that hard K sound, the Scottish CH McLaughlin, or McLaughlin as in the F for laughter. These sounds have come to us. They're coming to us from all over the place. Cough, hiccup. How do you even begin to categorize this? The sounds are just scattershot right across the board. It's one of the really fun and really interesting things about English. And like I say, that's a fabulous little letter cluster because it's just so many pronunciations. So what do we pull out of this? What we pull from that entire mess is that when the language was changing, when English was shifting from Old English to Middle English to right through to Modern English, a lot of these words were frozen. Those OUGH words are common words, perhaps not common today. I'm thinking bough, as in the bough of a tree, is not quite so common today, but they were common years ago. The loch, which is a lake, of course that's going to be common. Through, although, bought, brought, thought, all of these words, and because they were in common usage and used every day, they were a little more resistant to change because of that common, constant usage. So anyway, what are we going to take from this? That English is a crazy language? In this one sense, with this 4-letter cluster, yeah, doesn't get any crazier than this. This is just wild. Like I say, I know of no other set of 4 letters with 11 distinct pronunciations. No. And keep in mind, even if you, as many people will, pull off 3 of those and say, well, those are dialects. I don't like to do that because I'm not a big believer in separating the dialects of English because, frankly, our language is universally comprehensible among all English speakers. Therefore, I don't like pulling out a word simply because it refers to a river in Australia or because it might be more commonly used in Scotland than it's used in Connecticut. I don't like that. That's like one word. I'm not a big believer in this whole English has dialects. I think there was a time when it did, but I also think that English over the centuries has become very standardized. Yes, we may have different accents, but we are universally comprehensible. If you are from Johannesburg, if you are from Perth, if you are from Los Angeles, if you are from Dublin, doesn't matter. You're all speaking the same language. You can all communicate, not just easily, but with no difficulty whatsoever. None. I don't even know how somebody can say it's anything more than regional accents and a few bits of slang. So, no, I'm not writing it off as dialect. However, if you were going to, and you pulled 3 of those words out, as a lot of people do, and say, well, those are dialect words, still, it's 8 separate pronunciations and very distinct pronunciations for those letter clusters. Amazing. Now, I love this because what it tells me is that English is just a fabulous language. All languages, of course, are unique. Every language has its strengths. Every language has its weaknesses. I'm going to be prejudiced in favor of my own language, as I'm sure everybody is. But it's nice to know that we have this amazing little 4-letter cluster, and no one else has anything even close to it. So, is this good, bad, whatever? It's going to make English a challenge. At least those words are going to be a challenge for someone learning English as a second language. But still, it's fun. It's one of the great things we can embrace about our language. It's a bit of novelty. It's a bit of fun. It's a bit of interest. I love the fact that at some point in our past, those GHs were undoubtedly pronounced. I love the fact that in time they fell away. I love the fact that dafter is not the pronunciation that stuck with us. Instead, we went over to the Scandinavian daughter. By the way, we could have just as easily gone over to the German Tochter, which is probably closer to dafter than daughter, but hey, it's just the evolution of our language. And frankly, I love the fact that it's still evolving. So, OUGH. We'll see you. I was just about to say, we'll see you tomorrow. We won't see you tomorrow. We will see you on Friday. So, have a great couple of days.